The rose bush wasn't blooming yet, but that comes later. Let me take you back to the moment everything changed. To a backyard potluck, string lights swaying in the evening breeze, and the sound of my own son's voice cutting through 15 years of quiet sacrifice like it was nothing. "She's a burden nobody asked for." I was holding a serving spoon when he said it. 6 of my neighbors were standing close enough to hear. My daughter-in-law didn't even flinch, which told me she'd heard him say worse, privately, more times than I wanted to know. I set the spoon down very gently on the table, and I smiled. Not because I wasn't hurting. I was hurting in a place so old and so deep I'd almost forgotten it could still ache. I smiled because for the first time in 2 years, I finally understood something with total clarity. I was done, but to understand why that sentence broke something loose in me, something that had been quietly cracking for 2 years, you need to know how we got there. My name is Eleanor Whitfield. Most people who love me call me Nora. I'm 63. I spent 31 years as a high school librarian, which is a job that teaches you patience in ways nothing else can. You learn to wait out a room. You learn that silence, used well, says more than shouting ever could. I learned that lesson at work. I forgot to apply it at home. My husband Walter and I bought our bungalow the year we got married, a rundown 1920s craftsman, with sagging porch steps and a kitchen that hadn't been touched since Eisenhower was president. We spent 20 years fixing it up ourselves, weekend by weekend. Walter built the bookshelves in the study with his own hands. I chose every tile in that kitchen. That house isn't just where I live, it's where my whole life is kept. Walter passed 6 years ago. Heart attack, sudden, no warning, no goodbye. After that, the house got quiet in a way I never fully adjusted to. So when my son Marcus called me, 2 years ago, his voice tight with a kind of shame I hadn't heard from him since he was a teenager, and told me his business had collapsed, a boutique architecture firm he'd poured his savings into, and that he, his wife Priya, and my grandson Teddy needed somewhere to land, I didn't hesitate. "Come home," I told him. "As long as you need. I want to be honest with you. Some small, quiet part of me was even glad. The house had been so empty. I thought, maybe this is a gift. Maybe I get my family back for a while." For the first few months, it almost was. Marcus helped fix the fence. Priya thanked me for every meal, every load of laundry. Every night I watched Teddy so they could look for work in peace. There was a rhythm to it that felt, for a moment, like healing. Then the rhythm changed. Youth. It happened slowly enough that I didn't see it as it was happening. The way you don't notice a room getting darker until you try to read and realize you can't see the page anymore. Marcus found freelance work eventually, then a junior position at another firm. Priya picked up marketing contracts, then started chasing something bigger online. Sponsorships, brand deals, a following she was building around a lifestyle none of us could actually afford. But the temporary stay never ended. Neither did the assumption that everything in that house, my time, my money, my kitchen, my patience, existed for their convenience. I paid the electricity, the water, the internet Priya needed for her online life, the groceries, which grew more specific by the month, organic this, imported that, brands I'd never bought for myself in 63 years of grocery shopping. I covered Teddy's school supplies, his shoes, the fees for his soccer league. I never once heard the words, "let us contribute." I became the household's invisible infrastructure, the woman who made sure the refrigerator was full and the bills were paid and Teddy got picked up from school, and who otherwise was expected to stay out of the way. Priya rearranged my living room within the first year, moved my reading chair, the one Walter gave me for our 25th anniversary, into a corner so there'd be better flow for her photos. She invited friends over without asking, filled my kitchen with people I didn't know, and grew visibly irritated if I so much as made tea while they were there. Marcus watched all of it happen and said nothing. Worse than nothing. Sometimes he'd laugh along, the way you laugh at a joke you don't actually find funny, but don't want to be the one to object to. I told myself, they're going through a hard time. I told myself, this is what family does. I told myself so many things, in fact, that I nearly forgot what my own house used to feel like. The only person in that house who still saw me, really saw me, was Teddy. He's 7. gap-toothed, endlessly curious, carries around a stuffed raccoon named Biscuit that used to belong to Marcus when he was small. Every evening, without fail, he'd find me in the garden or the kitchen and tell me about his day in exhausting, wonderful detail. He was the reason I kept getting up every morning, with something like purpose. I want you to remember that, because it matters for everything that comes after. The night everything broke was supposed to be a good one. I'd offered to host a small neighborhood potluck in the backyard, something I used to do every summer with Walter, before it stopped feeling worth the effort. String lights, folding tables, neighbors bringing casseroles and lawn chairs. I hadn't done it in 3 years. Something in me wanted to try again. Marcus was tense all evening. I noticed it but didn't understand it. Not until later, when I realized the truth. He was embarrassed that our neighbors, people he'd grown up around, now knew he was 34 years old and living in his mother's house. Embarrassed in a way that had curdled, over 2 years, into resentment. Not at himself, at me. Mrs. Alvarez, from 2 doors down, made an offhand comment. Kind, really, just chatting, about how nice it was that the whole family was together again. Marcus's jaw tightened. Then his daughter asked Teddy, sweetly, "Do you like living with your grandma?" And Teddy, without any idea of the storm he was about to set off, said, "Yeah, she's the best. She makes the best pancakes." Marcus's face changed. I watched it happen in real time. Something in him snapping under pressure that had been building for 2 years. "She's not doing us a favor," he said, loud enough that the whole yard went quiet. "She's not some saint. She just likes having people to control." He turned toward me, and his voice rose further. "She's a burden nobody asked for." I want to tell you the yard went silent, but that's not quite right. It went still. Still in the way a room goes still, right before something breaks. Priya didn't defend me. She didn't defend him either. She just looked away, like this was a rerun of an argument she'd already grown tired of. I set my serving spoon down. "Marcus," I said calmly, "I think it's time our guests headed home." The neighbors left within 10 minutes, murmuring polite excuses, avoiding eye contact the way people do when they've witnessed something they weren't meant to see. And once the yard was empty, once it was just the 4 of us standing among the folded chairs and half-eaten dishes, I looked at my son. "You have until this time tomorrow to be out of my house." Here's what I need you to understand about that moment. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't in tears. I felt, if anything, a strange and total calm. The calm of a decision that had actually been made a long time ago, quietly, somewhere beneath the surface, and was only now finally reaching the light. Marcus laughed. That same nervous laugh he'd had as a teenager, whenever he was caught doing something he knew was wrong. "Mom, don't be dramatic. I was just venting." "I heard exactly what you said," I told him, "and I meant exactly what I said." Priya crossed her arms. "You're really going to throw your own grandson out over one comment?" "I'm not throwing Teddy anywhere," I said, and I made sure my voice stayed even, because I would not let her twist this into something about him. "Teddy will always have a place here. This is about the 2 of you." Marcus shook his head, still smiling like this was a bluff he expected to fold. "You'll change your mind by morning." "No," I said, "I won't." I went inside, locked the back door out of habit more than necessity, and sat alone in the study Walter built with his own hands. And for the first time in 2 years, I let myself think, really think, about everything I'd absorbed in silence. The dismissed comments, the rearranged furniture, the unspoken assumption that my house, my money, my time, existed to be used. I thought about something I used to tell students at the library, back when a kid would come to me overwhelmed by a group project, where they were doing all the work, and getting none of the credit. I'd tell them, boundaries aren't about punishing anyone. They're about telling the truth about what you can carry. I had been carrying far more than the truth for a very long time. By morning, they believed I would have softened. They believed wrong. Woode. I was already awake when I heard them come downstairs, still expecting last night to dissolve into a normal Tuesday. Priya went straight to the refrigerator. "We're out of the oat milk," she said, like nothing had happened. "And can you pick up salmon for tonight?" "No," I said. She turned. "No? I won't be doing the shopping today. Or, as it turns out, any day after today." Marcus came in, tying his tie, still moving like a man who assumed his world was intact. "What's going on?" "I told you last night," I said. "You have until this evening." His face shifted, the first real flicker of doubt. "You're serious?" I have never been more serious in my life. While they'd slept, I hadn't been idle. I'd gone through the joint accounts Marcus had convinced me, 2 years ago, would just make things easier. I removed him from the card he'd been using for personal expenses. I called the insurance company and took him off the Volvo wagon, the car he'd been driving as though it were his own for over a year. I canceled the streaming subscriptions, the meal delivery service Priya had signed us up for without asking. Nothing dramatic, no shouting, no scenes. Just quietly closing every door they had mistaken for a permanent right of entry. Marcus reached for the car keys hanging by the door out of pure habit. "Where's the key?" he asked, patting his pocket, then the hook, confused. "In my purse," I said. "You'll need to find another way to work today." "That's my car." "No," I said. "It's mine. It's always been mine. I'm your son. And you're a 34-year-old man who spent 2 years living entirely at my expense, while calling me a burden in front of my neighbors." Priya's arms tightened across her chest. "This is insane." "Just give him the keys, Eleanor." I didn't answer her. I walked past them both into the study and closed the door softly behind me. Through the wall, I heard Marcus mutter something under his breath, heard the front door slam hard enough to rattle the old glass panes Walter had installed himself. I sat at my desk and opened a book I'd been meaning to read for months. My hands were steady. That surprised me more than anything else that morning. By noon, Priya had returned from wherever she'd gone, her yoga studio, I assumed, given the leggings, with 2 friends trailing behind her, laughing about something on her phone. This wasn't unusual. She'd done it dozens of times before. Fill my living room with people I'd never met, then expect me to make myself scarce in my own home. That day, I didn't move from my chair. A few minutes later, her voice rang out from the kitchen. "Eleanor?" I set down my book and walked in. She stood in front of the open pantry, both doors wide, staring at shelves that held almost nothing. "Where's everything?" she asked. "Put away. Somewhere else." "What does that mean?" "It means the groceries I purchased with my own money are no longer available for casual entertaining." Her face hardened, though she kept her voice light for her friend's benefit. "I wanted to put together a little snack spread. There's nothing here. You and Marcus both have incomes," I said. "If you'd like to host guests, I'd suggest buying your own food." One of her friends suddenly remembered an appointment. The other agreed with unusual speed. Within a minute, both were gone, murmuring apologies as they went, and Priya stood alone in my kitchen, staring at the closed front door. "You humiliated me," she said. "No," I said. "I simply stopped participating in something that was never mine to fund." She stormed upstairs without another word. At 2 o'clock, my phone rang. "Marcus?" I let it ring twice before answering. "What did you do to my card?" His voice was tight, the restaurant noise behind him loud enough that I could tell he was somewhere public. Somewhere his card had just failed in front of people. "I canceled it," I said. "It was mine to cancel. I'm having lunch with a client." "This is humiliating." "I imagine it is. The bill's almost $80. I don't have the cash on me." "Then I'd suggest you figure it out," I said, and I meant it kindly, not cruelly, the way you mean it when you finally understand that solving someone else's problems for them was never actually helping them. "That's not something I can fix for you anymore." "Mom," I ended the call. For years, whenever Marcus stumbled, I had been there to catch him before he hit the ground. Every missed payment, every bad decision, every consequence, I'd absorbed it so he wouldn't have to feel the weight of it. He'd never learned what it meant to fall, because I'd never let him. That ended that afternoon, somewhere between a canceled card and an unpaid lunch bill. I spent the rest of the afternoon in the garage, pulling out the flattened moving boxes I'd saved from months of deliveries. I hadn't planned to need them so soon, but I'd kept them anyway, some instinct in me preparing for a day I hadn't yet let myself imagine. I carried them upstairs, one stack at a time, and left 20 of them outside Marcus and Priya's bedroom door. I didn't pack a single item for them. I didn't touch their belongings. I simply gave them the tools to do what needed to be done. By 6 that evening, the front door opened. Marcus and Priya walked in together, faces drawn with the particular exhaustion of two people who'd spent a day discovering how much of their life had quietly depended on someone else. They saw the boxes stacked in the hallway. Neither of them laughed. Neither made a sharp remark. They found me at the dining table with a cup of tea, a novel open in front of me. Marcus walked over and placed both hands flat on the table. "Enough," he said. "You've made your point. Cancel, whatever this is. Bring back the card, the car, all of it. This is still my house," he added, quieter. "I grew up here." I closed my book. "You didn't grow up here, Marcus. Your father and I bought this house the year you already had your own apartment across town. You've never lived here a day in your life before 2 years ago." He opened his mouth, then closed it. I reached into the folder I'd left on the table earlier and slid a single document across to him. The property deed. Priya leaned over his shoulder to read it. "Eleanor Whitfield, sole owner. Family doesn't mean unlimited access to my money, my home, and my patience," I said. "I gave you 2 years of both, freely. I'm not required to give you a third." His voice dropped, some of the fight draining out of it. "You can't just put us on the street." "I gave you 24 hours, I said. "That was generous." Priya's expression shifted into something colder, more deliberate. "You're forgetting someone." I knew exactly who she meant, and I understood, in that instant, that they believed my love for Teddy would be the lever that finally moved me. They were wrong about that, too. I would always protect my grandson. That had nothing to do with protecting his parents from consequences they'd built for themselves. Small footsteps sounded on the stairs before either of us could say more. Teddy appeared in the hallway in his pajamas, Biscuit clutched to his chest, looking between his parents and me. "Why is everyone fighting?" he asked. Priya turned to him quickly. "Grandma wants us to leave, Teddy. She doesn't care where we go." "Priya," I said sharply, and she stopped. I crossed the room and knelt down until Teddy and I were eye to eye. "Look at me, sweetheart," I said gently. "This house will always be a safe place for you. Your room stays your room. You can visit any time you want, and I will always, always be your grandma. That doesn't change. Not ever." His grip on Biscuit loosened slightly. "But why do they have to go?" "Sometimes grown-ups forget that a home needs rules to stay happy," I said. "Your mom and dad need their own place, with their own rules." "Did I do something wrong?" he asked, so quietly it nearly broke something in me. "No," I said immediately, firmly. "You didn't do anything wrong. This isn't about you. It never could be." He stepped forward and wrapped his arms around my neck, and I held him there for a long moment, the room silent behind us. When he pulled back, I took his hand and walked him to the kitchen for a glass of milk, leaving Marcus and Priya standing among the boxes with nothing left to say. That night, the upstairs hallway filled with the sound of tape tearing and drawers sliding shut. I heard fragments of arguing through the walls, Marcus insisting I'd change my mind by morning, Priya telling him I wouldn't. She turned out to be right. At 8 the next morning, the doorbell rang. A locksmith stood on the porch with his toolbox. "Morning, Mrs. Whitfield," he said. "Here for the lock replacement." Marcus, coming down the stairs with a suitcase, froze. "You called a locksmith?" "I did. We're still packing." "Then I'd suggest you hurry." The drill's whine filled the hallway as the old lock came apart. Marcus stood watching it happen like a man watching the last door of an argument close for good. "You're really doing this." "I already have," I said. By 10, the rental car Priya had arranged sat outside, packed to the roof, suitcases in the trunk, black garbage bags wedged into the back seat, boxes with hastily scrawled labels on the floor. Teddy sat beside me on the porch swing, drawing quietly in a notebook while I held a mug of tea I wasn't really drinking. Marcus carried the last box out and set it down near the car before turning to me. "I hope you're happy," he said. His voice was cold, but underneath it, I heard something else. Fear. For the first time in 2 years, he had nowhere left to hide from the consequences of his own choices. "I'm not happy it came to this," I said honestly, "but I'm not going to stop it either. You're choosing this house over your family." "No," I said. "I'm choosing to have dignity inside it. That's not the same thing." Priya walked past us toward the car, Teddy's backpack slung over her shoulder. "Come on," she told him. Teddy stood and turned to me, eyes wide. "Grandma, when can I come back?" "Saturday," I said, kneeling to hug him. "We'll go to the park, and I'll make chocolate chip pancakes. Promise?" "I promise. Your room isn't going anywhere. Nobody's taking it from you. I love you," he whispered, "more than all the stars." When I stood, Marcus was watching us, something in his face softening for just a moment before he picked up the last bag. "We need to go," he said quietly. I walked them to the porch. "You'll regret this," Marcus said as he opened the car door. "Maybe," I said, "but I'd regret losing myself even more." The car pulled away. Teddy pressed his small hand to the window, and I raised mine in return, until the car turned the corner and disappeared. Then I went back inside, and a moment later, I heard the new lock click shut behind me. Quiet, small, and somehow it sounded exactly like freedom. The house felt strange in the days that followed. Not empty in a sad way, but empty in a way that finally belonged to me. No television blaring at odd hours, no tension waiting around every corner, no one needing anything from me before I'd even had my coffee. I opened the curtains Priya had always kept drawn for her photos. I moved my reading chair back to where Walter had always meant it to be, facing the window. I went through my finances that week and realized, without the weight of 2 extra adults, I was saving nearly $1,400 a month. Retirement, which had started to feel like a frightening cliff edge, suddenly felt like something almost possible again. I signed back up for the pottery class I'd abandoned 3 years earlier. I hired someone to help with the parts of the garden that had gotten away from me. Small things. Mine. Marcus didn't call for a week. I let that silence be what it was, and I found, to my own quiet surprise, that it didn't undo me the way I'd expected. I missed Teddy fiercely. I did not miss the version of my house that had stopped being mine. When Marcus finally called, it was simple. "Teddy wants to come over. Bring him." A pause. "That's it?" "No conditions?" "No conditions." Saturday came, and Teddy ran up the porch steps into my arms like no time had passed. We baked pancakes. We went to the park. Marcus picked him up that evening, quieter than before, and lingered a moment at the door before saying, "You seem different." "I am," I said. "How?" "I finally learned that love without boundaries isn't love, it's just permission." He didn't say anything to that. He just nodded, once, and walked back to his car. Weeks passed. Marcus kept bringing Teddy over on weekends, and slowly, the space between us stopped feeling so brittle. One Saturday, after Teddy ran inside toward the kitchen, Marcus lingered on the porch. "Can we talk?" he asked. We sat together on the bench near the door, the one Walter had built the same summer we planted the rose bushes. "The apartment's smaller than I thought," he admitted after a while. "The bills add up fast." "That's what independence feels like," I said, not unkindly. He gave a short, tired laugh. "I never really understood what you were covering for us. Not until I had to cover it myself. You didn't want to understand it." "No," he agreed. "That's fair. I think I was angry because I was ashamed. Losing the firm, needing to move back in with my mother at 34, it made me feel like a failure, and it was easier to be angry at you than to sit with that. I let that settle in the quiet between us. I called you a burden because I couldn't stand needing you as much as I did," he said. "I'm sorry, Mom." An apology doesn't erase 2 years. It doesn't return the money, or undo the nights I sat alone feeling invisible in my own kitchen. But it was a beginning, and I chose to let it be one. "I accept your apology," I said. "Trust will take longer to rebuild than words can manage in one conversation." "I understand that," he said. "Respect isn't something you promise once," I told him. "It's something you practice." He nodded, and something in his posture eased, like he'd been carrying that admission for weeks, waiting for somewhere safe to set it down. In the months that followed, Marcus changed in small, steady ways. He started arriving on time. He brought Teddy's school supplies without waiting for me to buy them. He asked before walking through the door instead of assuming he still had a key to it. Priya stayed more distant, but the demands stopped, and for now, that was enough. My bond with Teddy only deepened. We painted, we baked, we spent long afternoons at the park, and I made sure he never once heard me speak an unkind word about his parents. I wouldn't make him choose between the people who loved him. One evening, as he sat cross-legged on my living room floor, he looked up and asked, "Grandma, are you lonely?" I thought about it honestly before answering. "Sometimes," I said, "but being at peace is different from being lonely." "What's peaceful mean?" "It means your heart isn't always waiting for the next argument." He considered that for a moment. "Are you peaceful now?" "Yes," I said. He smiled. "Me too." That answer meant more to me than he could have possibly understood. The following spring, Marcus arrived early one Saturday, carrying a small potted rose in his hands. He stood on the porch a moment before speaking. "For your garden," he said. I took it from him. "Thank you." He glanced toward the door. "Can we come in?" I stepped aside. "Yes, you can." But this time, the invitation wasn't assumed. It was given. And that made all the difference in the world. As Teddy ran ahead toward the kitchen, Marcus paused beside the reading chair Walter had built, his hand resting briefly on its arm. "I never really noticed how much of this house Dad made," he said quietly. "He made all of it worth staying in," I said. I planted the rose that afternoon, in the same bed where Walter and I had put in our first bushes decades ago. It hasn't bloomed yet, but it will. Some things, respect, trust, a family worth keeping, don't grow because you demand it of them. They grow because you finally decided to stop giving away the soil.